I studied the effect of the audience's authority on social facilitation in order to see if I can boost productivity in students' performance. Now, social facilitation is when a person is affected while performing a task if there's an audience present. This is thought to be caused by the restriction of attention cues due to the cognitive overload of being evaluated. Like, you don't want to be evaluated, you're focusing on being evaluated, so it affects your performance. There are different factors that affect the magnitude of social facilitation. For instance, different types of personalities will affect how much you focus on being evaluated. And self-efficacy, which is like the belief in how well you can perform the task, also affects your performance. But what I'm going to focus on is this concept of upward comparison, which is when you think the audience is somehow superior to you in some sort of way. This has been shown to increase social facilitation, and in this study it decreased the errors that were made during the task. In order to manipulate social facilitation, a simple task that is used is the Stroop test. This is when there is a delay in processing between simultaneous stimuli that conflict with each other, such as when the word purple appearing in the color red makes it harder for you to name the color of the font. So, for instance, I would have the person say what the color of the font is, which would be red, but having the word there is conflicting, so it would take a couple more seconds than if you were just to read the word. Studies such as Sharma's study has been shown that if you shorten the time between the words, it decreases the preparation and increases social facilitation. Also, in this study, using upward comparison, it increases the magnitude of social facilitation. So I thought if there were different levels of upward comparison, such as different levels of superiority in the form of different forms of authority, then we can manipulate the magnitude of social facilitation, which is what I did in this study. I figured that there would be a difference between performing the Stroop test alone and in front of an audience, whether it be the experimenter, which is me in this case, or a fellow peer. This is just the basic statement of the social facilitation effect. What I wanted to focus on is the second hypothesis, that I think there will be a difference in the level of performance between the experimenter condition as compared to the peer condition, which is also known as the Confederate condition. So I took 70 high school students, and I made there was a completely random sample. It had nothing to do with gender or race, because past studies have shown that these factors don't matter at all. So I took all the subjects, and I had them take the Stroop test alone first, and then randomly they were split between the experimenter condition and the peer condition. In the experimenter condition, I would come in and stand directly in front of them. They would take it on a laptop screen, and I would be able to directly view their progress. But for the peer condition, I would have the student come in and sit in front of another student who will look like they have a laptop open, and they'll look like they're taking the test along with them. The actual Stroop test that they took was built on an EPIME program, and it involved words that would pop up on the screen one at a time, such as the words red, green, purple, and blue in non-matching colored fonts. And the test wouldn't let them continue unless they click the right button, and the program records the time it takes to complete the test in seconds. Now this is comparing the average times it took for everyone to take the test alone. And this first group is the people who would eventually move on to the experimenter condition, and these are the people who would eventually move on to the peer condition. As you can see, there was no significant difference between the average times, which is good because that means there was a random sample and I can properly compare the rest of the data. This is just an ANOVA test, which is an analysis done at 95% confidence to see if this is truly statistically significant. I'll just draw your attention to this number here called the p-value. If this p-value was less than 0.05, then it would be significant. But as you can see, the value is greater than 0.05, so there is no statistical significance. Next, we move on to what happened in the experimental condition. On average, the people who took it alone performed it in about 38.5 seconds. But once the experimenter came in and viewed their progress, it decreased the average time to about 20.7 seconds. According to this ANOVA, the p-value is way below 0.05, making this statistically significant. As well as the peer condition, you see that on average it took about 37.3 seconds to take it alone, as opposed to when you put the peer in front of them, it was 19.7 seconds to take the test. So as you can see, the value was less than 0.05, so this was statistically significant. And then I compared the experimenter condition to the peer condition. As you can see, it took about an average of 20.7 seconds to take it in front of the experimenter and 19.7 seconds in front of the peer. Though there was about, on average, 1 second faster in front of the peer, this was not statistically significant, as shown by the p-value being greater than 0.05. So, just to summarize everything, since there was no significant difference between the groups in the alone condition, I could properly compare the rest of the data because it was a random sample. And it was shown that there was a significant difference between taking the test alone and in front of both the experimenter and the peer. However, there was no significant difference between the experimenter condition and the peer condition, even though in the peer condition they performed slightly faster. If I was to compare this to the Sharma experiment, she was able to manipulate social facilitation by shortening the time between the words. However, she did not change the presence of the experimenter. There's never been another experiment where they actually put the experimenter in the room, making this the first time that anyone's ever tried that. Also, what I found interesting was that the peer condition was not meant to be competitive, but you put two students in front of each other and you tell them they're taking the same test, they're going to want to race each other. And so I thought it was quite interesting that something that was just supposed to be co-action turned into a competition. So in conclusion, I can say that there was a significant social facilitation effect. So I can accept the first hypothesis that there would be a social facilitation effect. But there was no significant difference between the experimenter condition and the peer condition. So my second hypothesis that there would be a difference cannot be accepted. Therefore, the magnitude of social facilitation is about the same as having an authoritative figure standing over you, such as the experimenter, as having competitive co-action, a slightly competitive air. So, if you were to bring this to a school environment, you equate the experimenter to a teacher and the peers to students. You would say that it's not necessary to have the teacher always directly hovering over students. If there's like a slightly competitive working together among the peers in a classroom. So you don't have to have all these evaluative tactics constantly pressed on the students. And you could still have about the same productivity among the students. In the future, I would like to test this in an actual classroom setting. I would like to administer some sort of task with the teacher present and with the teacher absent to see if it would affect performance. I would like to thank my mentor, Dr. Eric Scheinman at Dowling College, for helping me get through this. I'd like to thank Dr. Robertson for getting me the E-Prime program. I'd like to thank anybody who was my confederate during the experiment. And I'd like to thank Mr. Pilatos for really getting me through this. And without him, I wouldn't be able to finish.